Crimo III pleading guilty yesterday in a criminal trial that was just starting to get underway. He is the one guilty for the Highland Park.
Look at the report.
For the Highland Park mass shooting that happened on Independence Day in 2022. And the Highland Park mass shooting, killing 7, injuring dozens. Crimo initially apparently told police in a confession video during interrogation, but then recanted that. But that video is going to be admissible in court. So as the trial was starting to come together, jurors were picked. Instead of having opening statements, Crimo pleaded guilty. He's got 3 murder charges against the 7 people that he killed and dozens of other attempted murder charges. So clearly he's likely going to spend the rest of his life in jail. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Obviously, in Illinois, the Highland Park shooting was used as one of the instances that propelled Illinois lawmakers to pass the ban on semi-automatic firearms and magazines over certain capacities in early January 2023. That law is being challenged in court on multiple different fronts, and clearly it's still unresolved as to whether state government can ban semi-automatic firearms and magazines over certain capacities. But while that case is still pending in court, not much movement as of late in the appeals court. We still have the law in effect. But one of the champions of that law, State Representative Bob Morgan, he posted on X about the guilty plea of Robert Crimo III. And I'll just read to you this string of texts that Morgan put out. He says, today's guilty plea is welcome news for the weary hearts in the Highland Park community. This is a small step toward justice following the July 4th, 2022 mass shooting, as we continue to recover and heal. He goes on to say, amidst the loss of Catherine Goldstein, Erna McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Steven Strauss, Jacqueline Sundheim, Nicholas Toledo, Zaragoza, and Eduardo Uvaldo, we have been bracing ourselves for a criminal trial. Therefore, avoiding a traumatic trial is in everyone's best interest. I want to thank the state's attorney's office of Lake County, Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhardt and his exceptional team in helping secure this justice. Our gratitude also extends to the physical and mental health professionals who continue to care for those injured and impacted. Morgan finishes up his post saying, gun violence did not begin or end in the July 4th, 2022 mass shooting. Over 100 people die from gun violence in the U.S. every single day. Let us recommit to preventing gun violence wherever and however possible so that no more communities endure like Highland Park did. So that's Bob Morgan's statement there in the aftermath of the Highland Park shooter pleading guilty in this case. And as the Highland Park shooter pleads guilty, here's a headline from the Center Square from yesterday. And again, if you subscribe to the Center Square's newsletter, you'll get this in your inbox each morning, but not a bad idea to head over and check out the headlines throughout the day. But as Highland Park shooter pleads guilty, claims against Illinois State Police remain. Now, this gets a little into the weeds, but I think those who've been tracking the story understand this, right? So the criminal trial against Robert Crimo III has ended because he pleaded guilty. But the civil cases against Illinois State Police for giving Crimo a firearm owner ID card, those civil cases continue. Right? So just as the jury was to commence yesterday, Crimo pleaded guilty, 21 counts of first-degree murder, 48 counts of attempted murder. He'll be sentenced April 23rd. It's expected he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Now, as I stated, Illinois legislators used the Highland Park shooting as one of the reasons why they moved forward to ban more than 170 semi-automatic firearms and magazines over certain capacities. Highland Park, by the way, had their own local semi-automatic ban in place when Crimo killed people with a semi-automatic rifle. Crimo had purchased the firearms legally in 2020, having been issued a firearm owner's ID card by Illinois State Police in 2019. His father, Robert Crimo Jr., a former mayoral candidate, he was charged in connection with how his son obtained a FOID card, because someone under the age of 21 in Illinois to get a FOID card has to have a parent or guardian essentially sponsor their application. Now, Illinois State Police, they face 29 claimants in separate lawsuits through the Illinois Court of Claims for issuing Crimo a FOID card. And those claims could be very, very expensive. All right. If you click through on the link, you'll see the story that I wrote back in July where, they're facing these complaints, and it's going to be pretty pricey if indeed it goes through. I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars in claims that these survivors have against state police. So one of the charges within that civil complaint says ISP should have denied the FOID card application made by Cremo that was used to purchase firearms, including the one purchased February 7th, 2020 to perpetrate the shooting on July 4th, 2022. ISP approved the transaction even though it knew or should have known that Cremo had wrongfully been issued a FOID card. The day after the 2022 Independence Day shooting, Lake County Sheriff Deputy Chris Covelli, he disclosed local police responded to Cremo's home for a domestic violence call in 2019, but didn't make an arrest. Nonetheless, Highland Park Police did notify Illinois State Police of that with what's called a clear and present danger report. Get that other screen out of there. So, again, essentially what happened, Robert Cremo III, he is at home. His loved ones are worried about him. Apparently, he's making threats to himself and others. Police visit. They confiscate knives. They leave. Knives are returned. They then go for another call, at least one other time, to the Cremo residence and have another incident there. I think this one was more about self-harm that they were worried about. So clearly, Highland Park Police sent Illinois State Police a clear and present danger report, which should have prevented Cremo from getting a FOID card. At least that's what the plaintiffs say. Now, Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly, he tried to explain this back in, 2022 in July. Here's what he had to say about the criticism of Illinois State Police, as some say, dropping the ball and giving Cremo, somebody who shouldn't have had one, a FOID card.
And if you look at the report that was understandably submitted by the Highland Park Police Department in response to the information that they had, and then you look at the law that, with regards to clear and present danger, what the statute requires, what is that threshold? That did not meet that threshold. That's the consensus from old analysts and new analysts alike. We vetted it multiple times. Would that have met the threshold? And the consensus is no. After that point, there being no new development, no additional arrest, no additional criminal record, no new mental health prohibitor, nothing that indicated that the individual had been checked into a mental health facility that requires a new report. No basis for a firearms restraining order had been filed or an order of protection. All the things that are under the law that would be able to help us stop from issuing a firearms identification card. None of those factors were present.
So he says that they had analysts, old and new, review it and say, hey, this clear and present danger report's not enough by itself to block somebody from getting a FOID card. Rather interesting. Is the FOID card actually, doing what it was intended to do, or is it really just a bunch of hurdles and hoops to jump through and to trip people up who want to be law-abiding? They discussed this in the Joint Committee Administrative Rules hearing back in 2022 because Illinois State Police, after acknowledging, they had the clear and present danger report, but it was not actionable, they went through and said that they need to change their rules internally when it comes to clear and present danger reports and FOID applications to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. Well, that all has to go through a legislative process called the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. Here is Senate Minority Leader John Curran, when I think he was just a state senator back in 2022, questioning Illinois State Police about this.
When the application, or when the CMP report, clear and present danger report, was received, and there was no FOID application on file, or there was no FOID card action or issuance that had previously occurred, the matter then concluded, and there's no action taken on the clear and present danger report. That's what the practice was in September of 2019?
There was no action that could be taken because nothing was pending. Yes, sir.
No determination, no investigation was done by a reviewing officer. No determination was made on that CMP report because there was no FOID card issued, no application pending. The next day, you're telling the public that a review was done and a burden was not sustained. I'm asking which is it? And I mean, you're talking in the press, we're reviewing your rule. I want to be helpful. I just want to make sure I understand what we're addressing to make sure that we have a totality of a response that's going to ensure public safety.
So it goes on. It went on from there, and you can actually, in the archives of the Center Square, you can see that linked up as well in the story from yesterday about Cremo pleading guilty. But it goes on from there. And Curran, after that JCAR hearing, I chatted with him briefly and just asked him, where we're at in all of this, and are the answers clear enough? Are the rules that were put into place necessary, or could they have used the clear and present danger report in 2019 to block Cremo from getting a FOID card? Here's Senator Curran. Dan, go.
So it's still very vague and murky as to what happened here. We need a clear answer. It would seem to make sense to me when we have a tragic situation like July 4th that happened, that highlights a problem in our safety net around guns, that we first diagnose the problem, what happened specifically, and address that problem before we move on to anything else. That still hasn't been done here. That's step one in promoting better gun safety and public safety. And until that's done, I'm not sure we should be moving on to 2, 3, and 4. We have to make sure this is done first.
So we have a FOID card in place. It's meant to be a way to check firearms owners and to do backgrounds and have an extra step for them to purchase firearms, and people can have their FOID cards revoked. And when they're revoked, they're supposed to surrender their FOID card and firearms to police, and police have the ability to go after those who have revoked FOID cards to confiscate the FOID card and any firearms. That in Illinois, the law requires you to have this FOID card. While I understand it's being challenged in the courts, and there's been some rulings that the FOID card is unconstitutional, it's still the law of the land until the final actions are taken by the courts. But the FOID card is there to kind of have this process in place. And back in July of 2024, Brendan Kelly said, hey, we're making efforts and strides and getting FOID cards revoked from people, away from them, and going after their firearms as well.
We've had tremendous success on a number of fronts, not just the universal background check solution that we came up with, but also the tremendous progress we've made when it comes to clear and present danger, more enforcement of firearms restraining orders, getting resources to local law enforcement, not just the state police, to be able to enforce these laws. So there's a whole host of things that have become a reality and that we're doing on a daily basis. Just from June of last year to June of this year, over 11,000 reports of clear and present dangers have been submitted to the Illinois State Police from local law enforcement, from schools, from mental health officials, and in reviewing those, 10,000 of those were founded. And that there was evidence, there was enough information to say that this person was a danger and met the threshold for the statute. And that resulted in thousands of revocations. That resulted in thousands of individuals being denied the ability to get a firearm. The firearms F-tip program, when someone tries to purchase a firearm, over 15,000 of those last year. So if you start to add those numbers up, just in a year time frame, the laws in the state of Illinois that are trying to protect people and trying to make sure that we don't put guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. That's over 25,000 times that we've done that just in the past year.
And again, that's Brendan Kelly, the director of Illinois State Police from 2024 in July. So just last year, like 7-8 months ago. But listen, there's still issues here, right? Here's another headline from the Center Square. Illinois' gun ID card scrutinized amid violent crime outcomes. After a triple homicide suicide in Bloomington, you've got another instance here. A Bloomington Police Department news release last month said a firearm used in a triple homicide suicide was recovered at the scene under the body of Christopher Simmons. The firearm was legally purchased by Simmons in 2021. In 2022, Simmons' FOID card was revoked, and he was prohibited from legally owning firearms. The Illinois State Police informed local law enforcement that Simmons failed to submit a firearm disposition form. ISP spokesperson said notification of Simmons' revocation was sent and included the law enforcement portal, which local law enforcement agencies can use to enforce the law. Now, the Center Square did ask for Bloomington Police if confiscation or seizure actions were taken, but they did not respond. So clearly, you've got another instance here, right? Where Simmons was released on condition discharge for 18 months in September of 2023 for a misdemeanor gun charge, but you didn't have any actions apparently taken to get the firearm and the FOID card from Simmons. So you've got these high-profile instances of the FOID card. You know, what's it really doing? Is it... Yeah, Brendan Kelly says, hey, thousands of people have had their FOID card revoked, and we've followed up and done revocations on those, but there's still others that it hasn't happened with. And is that the answer to have this FOID card be an impetus to either, allow people to have a firearm or to prevent people from having a firearm? Last week we talked about the Illinois House Gun Violence Prevention Committee that had a bill increasing the firearm transfer fee from $2 to $10 so they can use some of that money to give grants to local police to go and confiscate firearms from people who have revoked FOID cards. So is that the answer here? I just putting this out there for you, right? This is the overview of exactly what's going on. But again, Illinois State Police, they, I think, are still going to have to answer to $58 million in claims that the Illinois Court of Claims has filed with plaintiffs alleging ISP was negligent in giving the Highland Park shooter a FOID card. And now that the Highland Park shooter has pleaded guilty, does that mean that those cases are going to move forward? I guess we'll watch and see. But clearly, you've got some significant questions and some loopholes and some people falling through the cracks where it gets pretty contentious. Some other gun news today. You've got the U.S. Supreme Court. They are hearing a case where Mexico has brought against U.S. gun manufacturers. SCOTUS blog says that just 2 weeks after the Trump administration designated 6 Mexican cartels as foreign terrorists, Mexico will come to the U.S. Supreme Court today in an effort to hold U.S. gun makers liable for cartel violence committed with U.S.-made weapons. This is a very similar issue that we're seeing in Illinois, where Chicago sued Glock, the gun manufacturer, saying that Glock makes their firearms too easy to convert into full auto and needs to be held responsible for that. Looking at the court docket here for Cook County, the case, they've got some dates coming up, right? They do have, March 21st. It's going to be open call. So there will be a hearing in Cook County Court, 2 o'clock. But then May 19th, another open call. So these might be just status conferences, maybe getting things on the calendar, setting things up. So while the U.S. Supreme Court is going to hear the case that Mexico brought against U.S. gun manufacturers, you've still got the case that Chicago brought against Glock pending, with some future court dates to keep in mind. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for being with me each and every weekday morning. And we've got tons more to tackle, all right? The Illinois legislature's in session today, so be back with us tomorrow and catch what the latest is out of there. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Get the newsletter at thecentersquare.com and get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus.